Hello, everyone. Hello. Hi, Rika.
Hey, amazing. It works.
Yes, it works. Technology has once again not failed us.
Amazing.
How
Trying
are
to get
you?
right. I'm good. Very, very cold here. So, yeah, getting driving the car was a bit of a busy,
Hmm.
like making it out of time was, but I'm here. I'm super happy. All very good, very Christmassy, let's say. We are,
Christmas?
yeah,
Sorry,
Finland is very much
sorry,
a Christmas
you
place.
were breaking up just a bit, but I think I heard that Finland is very Christmassy.
Yeah, we're very, very
Yeah,
Christmassy, so it's getting crazy around here with stuff, but all good.
yeah,
How about you?
yeah. Um, I'm good. I've been very busy. I'm looking forward to the holiday time more just to have downtime more than anything else. Just to have an excuse, not that we really need it, but sometimes we do need it to just lay low. And it's still very, very mild here. It's not normal, and there's no snow on the ground right now. And it's just yeah, it's a little bit eerie, but I'm looking forward to the shift to a new year on a few
Yeah,
different levels. It feels like the right time. Yeah.
definitely, definitely, definitely.
Yeah. I'm happy
Yeah,
to see you again. I like our weekly chats.
I like them too. And whoever is watching, then my name is Riikka. I'm a Kundalini Yoga teacher coach with a past in activism and arts. So welcome from my behalf. And
Yep. And my name is Maya Kamala, and I'm living in Montreal, Canada. And I also have a background in community organizing, activism of different kinds, some journalism of the past. I'm a writer as well. I identify as a creative writer. And so I'm wielding words all the time as well. And
mm,
these live talks are our joint effort to interweave a look at how Kundalini yoga and activism and art or creativity are all kind of very much connected, and how they play out in our practice, both on the mat as well as in life, as well as in all the many battles for social justice going on, ones we take part in and the ones we don't. And so, today we're talking about gender and binaries, gender identity, binaries and binarism in yoga, Kundalini yoga specifically,
mm.
as well as what I like to think of as the justice inherent in transcending all of that as well.
Mm.
Which there's a lot to talk about there. So
Yeah.
yeah, um, so I mean, yeah, I have a few questions for you because I know you have a lot of um, things to share about this. I just wanted to introduce the idea of so, so there's a lot of binarism. I don't use that word very often, but binary thinking in yoga, and we're talking Kundalini yoga specifically today. So anything from masculine and feminine energy, for instance, to dynamic, active versus still and static, to uh,
Be and
just
do.
be and do. Thank you. And these binaries, these dualities in yoga, as in life, help us to understand all sorts of really complex ideas and concepts. In activism, we have oppressed versus oppressor. We have good versus bad. In life in general, we have human versus nature. All these divisions, which exist and which are helpful, but which may be limited as well. And in yoga, you have the thing that I find the most fascinating that I just want to quickly share is that in Kundalini yoga you have the Shakti, which is the feminine energy, the Kundalini energy, which is dynamic and creative, and which rises up through the body, through the spine, to meet at our crown, at our consciousness, the center of our God consciousness up here. Shiva, which is considered masculine, versus the Shakti, which is feminine. Masculine, which is still and just pure and all of this. And then they're meeting, they're coming together, they're merging, is what is considered the Kundalini rising, the evolution, perhaps the transcendence, our evolution of as human beings, our spirits. And so that's where it's all heading. That's where the purest form is actually genderless. There's no, and so that's where, so there's this question around, okay, well, does the language of binary duality, does that actually help us to get there, or is that limiting? And so, is there, basically, I just want to ask you, like, to start off, how has your journey with Kundalini yoga affected your relationship with gender identity, let's say, and how maybe binary worked into that as well? How has that changed your relationship, Kundalini yoga? Yeah.
I need to backtrack a bit because I'm not sure. I need to
That's
maybe
fine.
trace my
Answering the
path. So
question,
maybe
you can also
yeah.
backtrack and
So
answering a different question. Yeah.
yeah, because I think I've been very aware of the two genders, the duality of genders, and I've embraced very early on what I thought or think was a very powerful masculine energy in myself. Not just by my own experience, but also comments from other people that I had a very strong masculine energy. I remember being in the first year in my dance school in Amsterdam, and there was myself dancing as a woman. I was dancing the masculine classmate, John Kayongo from Kenya, who was dancing the feminine. And I think it was because the teacher saw there was something in the way we moved that was interesting within that, the duality. And so I've been always aware of that. But I think when it comes to Kundalini yoga, and it's very clearly addressing the divine feminine and talking about the creative feminine energy, I think it gave me another way of actually approaching the feminine as not something passive, but something very fertile, very creative, very always in flux. So getting new words into it, new kind of definitions of what feminine energy or manifestation of feminine power could be outside my cultural, what I had learned that culturally what femininity would mean, which would mean submissive, which meant being passive, but which meant to be quiet. So it gave me a kind of actually more range in understanding what feminine energy could be. And then also realizing a lot of internalized misogyny towards femininity or feminine traits that I had, even biologically or even with the moon centers, with my psyche. And then also gave me tools to emancipate that and also deal with toxic masculinity or sort of internalized patriarchy. So that was, I think that was for me, the Kundalini yoga really gave me the tools to kind of address those and start healing them, healing father wounds or masculinity within myself and with my lineage, my ancestors, and same with the feminine energy. And then coming up to the questions of like, okay, but what does this mean? How do I work around this when it's not when my own experience is not necessarily that I'm a man or I'm a woman, but I do feel like I've, since very early age, I would have called myself a twin spirit. So how
Mm.
I deal with that I'm not like men do this and women do that, and it's not like I've learned to deal with that, but it's not my experience of life. So how do I then start to not necessarily even translate, but like what is the actually the depth of the teachings, and what you were saying exactly, that we have both of the masculine and feminine, and in becoming enlightened is when we become both in a way. We transcend the duality in a way.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, what you're saying is really interesting, and it's making me think because you're saying that it gave, like, the practice has given you a new way to, or given you permission to, or a new way to feel empowered in your in femininity, perhaps even in masculinity, just a new way to relate. Maybe I didn't quite paraphrase that perfectly, but it's making me think that it's making me realize that for me, the Kundalini yoga practice, I mean, coming, like, when I first started, it seemed so, many of us can't help but compare Kundalini yoga practice to other types of yoga practice, especially when we've done them before and we come into it. And for me, it was like, wow, this is this is, on some level, this is so accessible. This is so simple. On another level, this is so challenging. The challenges, in almost many parts of the practices, challenge me mentally more than physically. Although there are exceptions, and there's no really duality there either. But so coming in, I feel like for me, I'm coming from a world here where, and many of us are, where to me there's this very dominant, very masculine force that has imposed upon everyone this idea that in order to be worthwhile and in order to be effective, it has to be complicated, it has to be complex, we have to be experts at complex things. And then we come in, and I come into this very welcoming, what feels like almost a womb to me of Kundalini yoga, where um, I'm welcome to access my deepest intuition and ability to heal myself more effectively than any more complex practice has ever been able to help me do. And this feels in many ways feminine to me. But it's just interesting to think about, because this idea that in order to be effective, it has to be as advanced and complex and just exponentially always taking on more complexity, or there's always has to be something novel or new. And this is the world we live in many ways too. So if we think about just so that's another thing. Duality and binarism help us to understand imbalance and balance too, in many ways, opposing forces at work. Um, so, but with yoga, with Kundalini, do you think that there is any issue or limitation around the language that's generally used? Do you feel like that it would be better to, for instance, rather than, well, there's two levels. There's one level where we're talking about masculine, feminine energies, which for me, I feel like that can work. And then there's another level where, which I think as teachers, or at least I definitely um, use my own judgment and use my own intuition for this, but there are also practices that tell anyone who's a man to do certain things with their hands versus
mm.
anyone who's a woman to do certain. That's different. I find those to be two different levels. But do you feel like you know what am I trying to ask? Do you feel like traditional Kundalini teachings are inherently binary, or is that more just a matter of interpretation or culture, things like that?
No, I think they're very binary.
Yeah.
I
Even
think it's very
though
binary.
they're heading for merging, but they're still binary.
Yeah, and I don't even think if there is. I think in with when we're studying at the Yoga Vision with Salima, I think we're definitely being encouraged to research the language that we use, and also to consciously work, weed out, you could say, conventions and unconscious ways of addressing people with the assumption of their gender.
Of course. Yeah.
So I think that I don't think that a lot of Kundalini yoga teachers are aware of the problematics in binary language in one hand. And like and even, I mean, I find it always very nice that everybody, if people wear a headscarf, then everybody's wearing a headscarf, and that's kind of nice way that there, it's not like, you could say in other cultures it's more gender so divided, but so that's in a way a nice thing. And the women are warriors in Sikhism, and somehow through that also to Kundalini yoga, there's a lot of appreciation and devotion towards the feminine power, the feminine leadership, and the warrior element of that both have, both men and women. But I don't know how, I don't know how aware people are, both in the language of gender, but even with the bodies of like, what can people do, or what people, like how there's a lot to be done for the inclusivity in general.
Yeah, I agree.
And even if we think that there's things like the Shakti dance, which is a maybe more feminine take, and it's a more modern take to the idea of Kundalini energy, I don't find myself very comfortable in that, because it's a kind of feminine quality that I don't relate to. And it's also, I'm a dancer, so I know I can do all that stuff, but I also notice that it's very much ableist. So if you have a certain kind of body, then it's easier for you to do. I do think it could be more inclusive, but there's just not much awareness of, if you're heavier, or if you're mask, or like maybe if you're femme identify, it's easy to come into that feminine flow. But for myself, I don't express my femininity in that way, and I find it quite uncomfortable to do that. So there's a lot of blind spots, but that's very individual for teachers, and of course how teachers are being educated. I think that's maybe the root is. If I make any sense.
Yeah, of course, and we can select practices to reflect where the ones that feel accessible and empowering in our bodies as well, and teach them in certain ways. So yeah, I'm not actually familiar with the Shakti dance. And that's the beauty of Kundalini. There's so many different practices to choose from as well. But it's interesting. Yeah. I've learned just teaching classes, even just for a few months, that what feels how many different experiences there are, regardless of gender, in the room, like between one student and another, how different a practice feels in different bodies. It's really remarkable. Yeah. And and there have been meditations for me too, where I'm blown away, like it's just nothing has gone deeper, and then I'll speak to someone even in our class who's just like, so it's very interesting.
No, exactly. But then at some point it could, later on it could.
Exactly, when we're ready.
But I do find it interesting to talk about energies, because it's, and also in the way of, like, if we want to do it like men do, or originally men have been advised to do some way, or women have been advised to do, it probably means that you can enhance your masculine or feminine qualities, energies. But we're talking a lot about energies, and when we go on that level, we transcend the identity body. You know, like me, my gender identity is a different thing than energy, and everything in the world is the duality, is the birth of manifestation, of creation. So we need the polarity, and I think the beautiful work in some of the Kundalini teachings when it comes to relationship or attraction or even sexuality is about how do we find that, how do we raise the Kundalini, how do we find that polarities with our partner, why do we get somebody, and what's that magnetism, and how do we work with it, and that it's maybe, you know, that's a very complex array of magnetic poles, and then we just kind of lock into the right person that, you know, just
yeah. No, I
so that
definitely agree. Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
No,
No, I was
that's
just
just
gonna.
very, very interesting work.
No, I agree. I completely agree, and I definitely agree that we need the polarity in order to get there. And I just, yeah, when it comes to different hand positions for men or women, I always, when teaching, I always just tell people to do which one feels right, so that maybe they'll be instinctively called in that moment to do which one they need more. And what was I going to say? Oh, I was just reminded. For those who don't know, Rika and I know each other from Kundalini Yoga teacher training, and there was one class a while back. I was reminded we were looking at moon centers. So in Kundalini Yoga, Kundalini science, it's understood traditionally anyway that women have 11 moon centers in our body, and men have one. Okay, so this is a traditional way of looking at things. And so the moon centers in women are, there's one in the chin. There's, I don't even remember where they all are, to be honest. Just different centers. Yeah, can you remember? Yeah.
If I'm actually quite I've got really into them. I really enjoy the moon centers. So
Yeah.
we have one in our hairline.
Yes. Yes.
We have the eyebrows. Then we have our cheeks, earlobes. We have our lips, the nape of the neck, our breast, and the nipples actually. Then we have our belly button, the lining of the membrane of the vagina, the vaginal membrane, the clitoris, and then the inner thighs. Those
Yes,
would be the ones.
exactly. Thank you. Yes. And the men were said to have just one in the
Yeah.
chin. And the traditional growing of a beard was meant to kind of protect and cover this area.
Yeah.
And for women, we were shifting from one moon center to another. What was it? Every couple of hours, or was it every couple of days?
No, 2.5 days.
2.5
Yeah.
days. And so, but I found it fascinating because we did this exercise, and there are people of different genders in the class. Not everyone is a woman. Not everyone identifies as a woman. And people of, it seemed to me that people, it was very interesting and telling to me that people of different genders, including those who are not women, were able to sense almost all of these moon centers by focusing on them. So I just found that interesting and pertinent to our conversation somehow, that maybe certain with certain types of practices and intentions, I mean, maybe we all just can have these experiences, these tap into these different energy centers. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
I'm not sure that if
No,
everybody can initiate them, but I could definitely buy into the thought that even if you're born into a biological woman's body, you might not
of
have
course. Yeah,
moon centers. And then again, there might be people who are born into a biological man's body but do have the moon centers, and that could explain, maybe could even explain a lot of twin spirit transgender experiences.
yeah.
Could definitely be.
That's a very interesting way to think about it. Yeah.
And there go into this, that it's not necessarily a choice. You know, like if you are, for example, a man who does experience the moon centers and whose psyche does fluctuate every 2.5 days, then it's a real experience. So
Yeah.
just there, you know, have certain body parts and certain not, so that doesn't make a difference. And I don't even know. I mean, a lot of the yogic teachings or wisdom, I don't think we have read everything or we know everything. And I wouldn't be surprised if there actually was some teachings that regarding non-binary or twin spirit experiences, or even android experiences, in the sense that, because they have been usually, it seems like that traditional cultures had much more of a natural relationship to this.
It does seem like it. It does, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
seems like a lot of that. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
there might be some things that were not, have been kind of cut out because it doesn't fit into this more modern idea of the two genders.
Mm. Mm.
I mean, you work with people like this, so what's your experience?
Oh, well, yeah, for 6 years, I was basically, what was it, 2008 or 9 to 2016, I was working full time at the Center for Gender Advocacy in Montreal. I was a campaigns and promotional coordinator. And yeah, I mean, my experience was just vast. There's so many different things I worked on, so many different people I worked with, people of all genders and backgrounds and experiences. Worked with a lot of indigenous communities, people of all different gender identities. I can't say that I really don't feel like it's possible for me to make any general statements at all, because just everyone's diverse everywhere. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure. But I do find it interesting, this idea that I think maybe you brought up to me before, about not that like any one person who identifies as non-binary is necessarily more evolved, but like this idea that maybe for humanity as a whole, this cropping up of non-binary identities could be a sign that we're I don't know, expanding our understandings in general, our understanding of gender, but also of existence.
Mm.
And so, yeah, what do you have thoughts about that? Like basically,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see this evolution of non-binary ways of thinking, more nuanced ways of understanding things, whether it's gender or anything else, as like a sort of evolution that's necessary not just for spiritual work, but also for basically movements for justice as well, because these practices can really benefit. What am I trying to say here? These practices can really benefit anyone embroiled in a fight for justice of any kind, any battle for um, self justice or social justice, by helping them to access deeper clarity and perhaps see things in less dualistic terms. I'm not
Yeah,
sure if that, uh, yeah, yeah.
totally. Whatever research I've done into culture and the idea
Mm-hmm.
as an ecosystem, and if you think about, and if you compare it to the culture that is trying to kind of take over, which is, I would say, capitalism. Capitalism is all about streamlining, and it as an ecosystem, it drives towards monoculture, to thinning of the complexity and pluralism of culture, because it wants to streamline, it wants to just, you know, make everything very efficient. So but if from that point of view, and even from just our ecological survival, pluralism, abundance of expressions, multitudes of culture, richness of culture, whether that's cultures in bacteria or biomes, or whether it's human culture or whatever bee cultures you want to talk about. When we are able to support expansion and abundance and plurality, there's a growth. And of course, if it goes all haywire, then you might get into chaos. So there's always this balance between maybe the masculine and the feminine, the more straight line, and they need to be in balance, so that
Yeah,
nothing becomes.
yeah,
Go ahead.
exactly. And that's ultimately that's what I feel like one of the main goals, at least as I understand it, as my body understands it, one of the main goals of Kundalini yoga is for me is to help balance masculine and feminine energies in everyone. Thus creating balance in our outer world as well, rippling out. Because yeah, for myself, I don't know. I find it difficult to describe or discuss just what my own relationship with masculine and feminine energies is. I don't feel particularly feminine some of the time. Other times I do. I feel like it's very in flux. Sometimes I feel a lot of masculine energy, and I'm okay with that. And I just feel like when I sit down to practice, everything just becomes I just want to say central channel. Everything just becomes wholly accepted, and I just feel like the best parts of everything I'm experiencing get sort of woven together, emphasized, and cleaned somehow.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so, yeah. So
definitely.
it's very interesting. Yeah. Sorry, what were
Yeah,
you going to say?
yeah. No, just thinking that when you go on the mat and you have the shushumna in between, so then you have the nadis, which could be the feminine and masculine, then it's somehow they all kind of work together so that the central energy can rise, and there it is about balance, and it is about strengthening what is weak, and and toning down that is overpowering, and
Mm-hmm.
somehow maybe one of the big parts of the self-development is that it's almost like having anemia. Like if you're only focusing on your feminine or your masculine energy, there becomes this anemic imbalance, and then you need it from some outside source. Somebody else has to provide either the masculine or the feminine in your life. But when you are able to harness and cultivate those within yourself, you become much more autonomous in a way of you're self-sufficient. And then there can be beautiful polarities still that emerges from encountering people that are what you find, if we talk now about sexuality, that you find interesting or drawn to, it doesn't mean that you become completely undrawn, but you're not anemic, and you're not depending, your life doesn't depend on having that somebody else providing you. For example, for women, that when you find your own masculinity, you find that own ground, that own support, that you are your own champion, that you are the one who creates that structure for yourself, where your feminine energy can flow and be free and open. So, and that you do protect and you do provide for yourself. And healthy. Of course, a lot of people who find that threatening, that women get empowered, and feel that if men embrace their feminine side, that they get weaker. That's your way of seeing it. Of course, it's threatening, but I myself find it very empowering. And actually, for myself, I have become more feminine by doing Kundalini yoga. I have been able to embrace the softness with me, and definitely become more able to yield into the feminine qualities that I have within me.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because I think words trip me up a little bit too when I start to say, oh yeah, I think I've become more feminine too. But then part of me is like, no, but you've actually gotten more comfortable with your masculinity as well. And so I think that there's a limit to being able to say which it is with words for me. But because the definitions can just be in such flux for me as well. I mean, there are understandings of which is which. I think that are personal to us in different ways sometimes. But for me, I just feel like practicing Kundalini yoga has made me just more comfortable with both and more comfortable with who I actually am, which of course is the main aim of Kundalini yoga practices, is to align us with who we truly are beyond gender. But it's interesting. I think, yeah, I'm just thinking you're mentioning as women bringing in more structure and allowing ourselves to bring in that more masculine protective energy for ourselves and all of that. I definitely feel that, and it's lovely because every practice in Kundalini interweaves often anyway more structured movements, more structured targeted movements with softer elements like mantra or more flowing movements. And sometimes just long periods of breath work. And so there's just so much interplay happening with masculine and feminine, if we want to look at it that way. And so there's really an opportunity to be everything to yourself within the context of one practice. So for me, that's it rounds out all the edges and just makes me feel more at home in who I am, both masculine and feminine. And I think on some days I feel more one thing, and on some days it's more the other. It's interesting. But I think it's important to think about. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it's really beautiful to have that permission to not be one, but to be, to have that. And I think that's one of the beauty of the moon centers, but also the embracing of the feminine energy rising is that it's not, the feminine energy is not one. It is cyclical. It is and there's nothing wrong with women or anybody who has those changes, in the sense that one day I do like ice cream, the other day I do not want to have ice cream anywhere near me.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's not, and I think that's been very much stigmatized, that women are crazy or unreliable or fluctuating, and it's just that's just how we are. And actually it can be very violent to always just say, like you said 3 years ago you liked blue and now you don't like blue, and you have to stick now with blue for the rest of your life. And that's just really, really unforgiving and very strict. Yes. And and so to acknowledge that and embrace that is one of the key factors, I believe, in the notion of that the future is feminine or feminist, and that the Kundalini is rising and the feminine is rising. It's kind of this post-humanistic idea of that everything else can be a way to succeed and do things and thrive beyond being a white man, European man, like that's which has become like the 0 point for everything. But that there are many of expressions to things.
And the ability, the permission to change our minds at any point. That's empowered consent, empowered consent at work, which can be changed, withdrawn, re-given at any time, and it's in flux. So yeah, it's an important exercise for all of us. Yeah.
Absolutely, and teach children that they need, and we teach ourselves to listen to our Satnam.
Exactly.
Use this of quieting down to moving our body, moving our energy, so that we can clean and clear all the the layers of whatever to really hear our Satnam. What am I actually feeling? What am I actually sensing? What am I desiring? Where do I want to be? And then so that it is a constant process. But that's a very revolutionary idea, because
It
the world
is. It
is
is.
built upon certainties, you know.
Sorry, I missed that. You said the work builds upon certainties?
The world, like
Ah,
a current patriarchic system, even the
yes,
capitalist system, is all about
yes,
being
yes.
always the same. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I think a lot about certainty versus uncertainty, speaking of binaries, and very convinced, very convinced deeply that certainty is a colonial construct, and that certainty should not be confused with clarity, which is very different. We can have clarity, we can attain clarity without feeling just certain of things, which to me is a form of uh, imposition and control, and oftentimes arrogance as well, like ego driven, the
Yeah.
certainty that we know exactly, yeah, how things are, because certainty is sort of tied to a certain permanence as well. Like, this is the way something is, and that's just how it is. Whereas clarity can sort of, and there should be a real distinction between the two. I think a lot of people tend to conflate these ideas, but clarity is really, can very much travel with, flow with things as they change and evolve. And really, that's what I love so much about Kundalini yoga as well. It's like, the clarity that you can attain from these practices, all while letting go of sense of certainty at the same time. It's medicinal. It's what we all need. And to
And
me, yeah.
no, just
Sorry, no.
cultivates listening. Perfectly, I interrupt.
Exactly. No. It does cultivate listening to ourselves very, very deeply, and then that helps us to listen outside of ourselves as well. And yeah, we're just, there's just a lot of addiction to, as I mentioned last time, formulas, certainty, certain ways of understanding the world that don't leave much room for evolving, essentially. Don't leave much room for, I mean, it's one thing for technology to become more advanced, but I'm talking about evolving on a deeper level as humanity. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
And somehow it connects to this whole narrative of why the Sikh based practices came to the West, and why, what, like, maybe karma of that whole lineage, what happened there, like why did it happen. We can disagree or agree whether it was right or wrong, but there was some reason that happened, and why Western women were very much taken by this practice, or it took it, and it was also, I mean, given in that, in good or bad, with Yogi Bhajan, he was very adamant of teaching women, and there's something in that is, Western women have a very different take to, or they have a different position of, especially white Western women did have a certain type of access or emancipation that maybe can unlock something for a wider femininity in the world. Of course, are not completely free of, absolutely are definitely not free from weak self-esteem, for example, which I think why yoga has been adopted so much into the fitness and wellness industry. But in the way of, hopefully it can expand now to all women in everywhere in the world, that you can be spiritual, you can be a leader, you can be still a woman, and you can still be successful. Like that whole package that has been kind of opposites, that you have to either be a feminine or you have to become a man and then become successful. But actually, how do you do that whole feminine leadership thing? That piece is quite important, I think. And there's a sort of interesting karmic evolution there that I find very interesting, and which is
Yeah,
for
no,
me why it's very Kundalini yoga.
yeah, no, and I think there's a lot of beautiful potential for evolving non-binarily as a human collective way through feminine leadership as well. Um, for starters, I think that a lot of women specifically, if we want to talk about white women or women in general in the West, I think that one of the reasons that so many women, more than men, are drawn to Kundalini yoga specifically, or yoga in general, Kundalini yoga specifically, and also all sorts of other holistic healing practices in general, more natural approaches. Is for starters, I mean, it becomes clear really quickly if you're someone looking to heal that there are very limited, very masculine, very limited answers for you in the mainstream, in the Western view of medicine and healing and in all of this. So I think that's why so many women or women identifying people have been drawn to these practices. They work and they help. They ultimately, I mean, something I think that's stopping so many feminine people, women, female identifying people from taking up the reins of leadership is this need to actually heal aspects of themselves first. And so I feel like that's one way that Kundalini yoga is really helpful, not only in helping women and others to heal, but in helping us to become leaders in our own right, helping to create all sorts of different types of leaders, more diversity in leadership. So like nobody can become a real leader when they're still trying to work through like the morass of health issues, whether physical, mental, things can become very overwhelming. I mean, there are leaders, of course, with health issues, but when in general, certain parts of the population are just really struggling to access sort of a free flow of energy, I'm struggling for my words here today, but for my own self, I've had a lot of chronic health issues, let's say. And whenever I've gone to the doctor, I'm 43 years old. And I understand that doctors in the Western sense are very, or just doctors in general are very helpful when you're bleeding from the head and you have something acutely wrong with you. But a lot of myself and a lot of women I know, and probably a lot of men, but perhaps they're less aware of it, I just don't know, but have a lot of chronic health issues. And as far as Western medicine goes for dealing with chronic health issues, be they mental, physical, emotional, it's just very, very limited and even damaging. And that, in my opinion, from where I'm standing, that really pushes down this ability for people inhabiting those bodies to rise up to meet their true selves and actually become leaders and moving toward the light, so to speak. So that's just another reason that I find these practices so valuable in creating leadership. And the beauty of it too is that it's part of the practice not only to take this within ourselves and become who we are, but also it's part of the practice to pass it on and empower others with that. So it's like a beautiful wildfire, a non-destructive wildfire.
Yeah. One teacher said that the future leaders are those who figured out how heal themselves and show the way for others. And I found that very beautiful because it changes the type of leaders that we are used to.
Exactly right. Hmm.
And I found that very beautiful. And it gave me feeling like, okay, I'm not just healing for myself, that there's a wider, and not even just for my family, but I'm healing that it's a kind of a alchemy of the world that is changing and is again creating culture that is different, creating these different types of mechanisms of yeah, sharing our own healing paths, and then and that's very beautiful because it connects to shamanism in a way, because shamans have usually been those who have been in the brink of death. You know, they've been either sick or they got some kind of, you know, some strokes, or anyways, they are people who know their way back from the brink of death. So that's actually how I learned from a healer. She was saying that, you know, I know the way there to the illness where you are now, and I know the way back, and then you learn how to come back, and that's how you heal. You learn the mechanisms how to heal yourself and come back to health. And that's very similar if you think about this future. And I'm sure we need a lot of healing. We need a lot of healing, already need a lot
We
of
do.
healing, but um
We do.
there's so many
And it's
that are being
okay.
implemented on our own bodies and our own psyches that, yeah.
Exactly. You know, and it's just this idea of having leaders who have done self-healing work is just feels so radical, especially in the world we live in. And yeah, just it really just begins to, it's exciting to think about redefining leadership and power, you know, in different terms, because then the ones that are generally accepted in the world at large, you know, who our leaders are and what power actually is, what is true power, what is where does personal power fit into this conversation, you know, and it's exciting to think that these understandings are in flux and are shifting. And, you
Yeah,
know, I mean, it's a long road, but personally, I do have faith that they're shifting in a good direction over the long term. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, there is a definite cultural change that needs to happen, because it is the mechanism, our societal mechanisms that are creating the ground for people who are psychopaths to thrive.
exactly.
You know, why is that? And I would say, like, it's not the fault of the psychopath. They just do what they do. And, you know,
Yeah.
that is not easy karma. It's not easy karma to be born as a sociopath or a narcissist or a psychopath. It's a hard karma to be born into. But why, how come we have such a fertile ground for them to thrive? So we do need to look into ourselves. We do need to look into why are people who would be the right people in power, why do they stay out of politics? Why is politics getting very toxic? Why are corporations, uh, why does the system sort of support, and that even it's even implemented in such a way that people who are naturally not born that way need to be that way, and they need to, that's a lot of people that are coached, and one of the big reasons is they are not in there, they cannot be aligned ethically with what they do in their work as leaders, because
Mm-hmm.
feel that, you know, there's too much money involved, too much competition involved. They're just not able, like, they don't feel that there's a freedom for them to take those bold visionary steps towards a world and leadership that they would actually want to do. So how do we create leaders who are bold and brave and say, like, okay, maybe this is not so much money, but we can be successful in other ways? And how do we not how do we start to calculate different types of successes? And then, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
long big story. But
Yeah.
what you,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
yeah. Sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, you're just making me think of systems, like we've inner versus outer systems. So we've created all these systems as a species that do not really reflect our inner systems. We've created these outer systems that do not reflect our inner needs at all. So this to me says that, there's been this period of time, which I guess is ultimately a blip in the grand timeline which we're all living, but it's a period of time where where there's been a lot of looking outward, and the interests at play are very much interests of the outside world. We're not looking in at all, and so I think in order to shift the things that you're talking about, it really does necessitate a looking within, and we're really wired. There's been a lot of wiring kind of to teach us exactly the opposite. And so, practices like this one, like Kundalini, and I don't think that Kundalini is necessarily the only way. There are a lot of really deep, profound practices out there around the world. Qigong is another one that I've tried at times, which has been quite beautiful. But Kundalini Yoga, just for me, helping us to go so deep within, just through something that everybody has, the ability to control our breath. I really think that, I sometimes I imagine, okay, what if we had a yoga class specifically filled with some of those psychopaths that you mentioned? What kind of, obviously, you have to be ready to come to one of these practices. This is the main thing. But interesting exercise to imagine that, I was thinking about it also the other day in terms of training police. Things like that, things that there's someone in our class who was a lawyer and was talking about offering Kundalini practices to judges. I think, and that there was receptiveness and openness to it at the time when she was telling us about it. So I think that with time, more and more people of all stripes are starting to want to look in because they see that there's only so much out there, and it's limited.
Yeah, and maybe something that can entice people to try it out is this freedom of or sovereignty of your thinking. I think that's been one of the really important aspects of being able to discern more deeply what is actually just a reaction or habitually, like even if I feel very strongly, to start to see like that's not actually what's actually going, like what is reality and how do I relate, what kind of thought forms am I drawn towards, how is my presence influencing this situation, and somehow how do I hold myself in neutrality without being passive, but kind of understanding, like seeing things clearer, and maybe you can even say that a little bit from above, to just sort of see this play of people. I think that could be something that could be language that helps people to realize the benefits that they could do, that it's not just about a cult, or it's not about religion, it's not about woo-woo, it's not about new age, but it's about having access to your own self, like how you operate, and discerning what is something that is part of your true soul self, and what is just something you learned, or you learned from your childhood, or learned to react in a specific way. And I think that's very important in activism as well, in the sense that sometimes we're just very triggered, just like all the time. And that triggered is just, we lose our power in that, because we're just reacting reflexively to everything, and there's no moment of just saying, like, seeing that buffer of like, okay, that's coming here now, how do I want to position myself, what kind of steps, so it's not so I can take a reaction, not just a reaction to things. So
yeah, it becomes almost a situation where having time to recalibrate and figure out next steps almost begins to feel like a luxury. a rare luxury, which it should not. So
yes,
yeah.
and I do believe that in politics it's the same. It's with human relationships, it is the same. So going back to genders, I think it can have a lot of healing in relationships, and also I do think that raising the Kundalini and realizing that there are these different elements, different aspects of energies can give us that freedom of also realizing that we are born into an incarnation, but like it's there to teach something or just experience something. Some like I had this conversation with one trans man, and concerning my own gender dysmorphia as a teenager, and I told them that at some point I just decided to embrace my female body, but that's also largely because I didn't have there was really nothing about trans. Like I had never heard that it would be possible. Like this, we're talking about mid 80s now. I had never heard about people transitioning. So not to make them feel bad, I said like, but you're born 20 or maybe 25 years after me, and there's a reason why you're born 25 years after me, so that you can transit. So like that even that is a kind of karma that it's not that my way is better or your way is better, or that I want to do you or you want to do me, but it's like we just born in different times for a reason.
Yeah, of course.
And to embrace that, and it's been a journey for sure.
Definitely.
But
Definitely have.
so
And then maybe just as a last or almost last thought, I'm just thinking now also that while Kundalini practice has, as we mentioned, can help to um, make peace with our masculine or feminine energies, to balance them out, to kind of braid them together in this glorious way. It's also such a beautiful reminder of that our physical body is just one part of us, right? And there's deep, deep comfort in learning of our other energetic bodies, of the limits of the physical as well. So I think that's where a lot of the evolution, the rising of energies, the transcendence comes from, in sort of embodying, internalizing some of that truth, or a lot of that truth, some of that truth.
yeah,
So yeah, just
definitely.
that we are all bodies, but we are also all a lot more than bodies. So
Yeah, and what is that true self who's undying, which is undying, who that experiencing the gender, or who's experienced this time, who's experiencing this cultural context, family context, relation that you're born into. And I'm very, very inspired by this idea of that there's no nothing, like in a way, like even if you experience something negative or limiting, that actually teaches you what you actually want, what is the freedom. Like limitations teach you freedom, pain teaches you what you want to be well, dysfunctioning relationships show you what you do want from relationships. And if we can turn that thinking from focusing on the harm or the unfulfilledness, maybe, or the lack in a certain situation, we can see how there's something there inside of us, that soul self is the one who's observing and learning and realizing things, which
yeah, exactly.
is empowering.
Yeah. Important conversations.
I do as well. And the hour goes so fast.
I know. time. What is time, really? I'm just joking. Sort of.
Perfect. Perfect.
Um,
Next.
yeah. Well, thank you, Rika, for having another one of these conversations with me in our series of explorations.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to talk to you because there's a lot of wisdom there and a lot of experience there. So
Well, ditto. Mutual. Yeah. Mm. Right. Well,
so
yeah. So we'll be back again in a couple of weeks, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah, the
Breaking for
holidays.
the holidays. Yeah. So happy holidays, everyone. And wishing everyone a glorious transition into 2025 as well.
Exactly. And if there are any thoughts, questions, also tell us where you're from if you're looking at this. So then you can share who you are, and if you have any questions, just pop them in the comments. Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.